first of the Labor senators to speak was Senator Feeney, and he carried a theme that turned out to be common with the second speaker as well, and that is, it was almost a speech of ideology, of envy, of you've got something we can't get. If you want to be fair and look at apples with apples, then look at the pre-2004 politicians scheme and look at what the military superannuation scheme is, and it's chalk and cheese. We didn't define the benefit. The Parliament of Australia defined the benefit. We inherited that, and now we've watched it get eroded away by some very clever economics. And the fact is that the indexation that was promised and intended by the likes of Mr. Whitlam, Barnard and Frank Crean, not Simon, Frank Crean, go and read his speech. And he was concerned that we must maintain the purchasing power. The living standards must be retained for the servicemen. How quickly you forget. Comment was also made that those who retire get a very generous pension. I'm going to stand aside. You can have a look at this graph that's on the screen behind me, and you'll perhaps get a better appreciation. Have a look where the majority are, will you please? The peak there is almost 18,000, and they're living somewhere between $19,000 and $24,000 a year, less than what the married couple age pension's worth. So, unfortunately, the misinformation program is in full swing right now, and we're seeing many government speakers stand up and pick an extreme figure and tell you what he's getting. 75% of the men and women joining the ADF under that old scheme left before they drew a cent. What did they get back? They got back what they put in by way of employee contributions to the cent, and not a cent more. No interest. So here you've got the government not setting aside anything as the employer into the DFRDB scheme, taking the troops' money and using it for whatever they want, and only giving back what it is they gave them to start with, no interest, if they left before, and 75% did. Think of the millions and millions of dollars that the Commonwealth didn't have to go out and borrow at the long-term bond rate, and could use that for infrastructure development. Where does that appear in the fiscal balance? Where does the $126 million that was transferred into consolidated revenue out of the DFRB scheme? Now, in today's dollars, that's probably worth about $1.2 billion. Where is that in the fiscal balance? Where is that accounted for in how much this costs the taxpayer, this scheme? No. Very, very distorted facts by envious people who want to create a picture of these fat cats roaming around when 90% of those on the DFRDB scheme receive less than $30,000 a year. Senator Gallagher spoke second. He used examples of a niece of his that's in the army, of a potential or prospective, I guess is a better word, son-in-law, who's also in the military. And also he went to Afghanistan and he spoke to some troops. And none of them complained about the superannuation scheme, so therefore there can't be anything wrong with it. I would hope Senator Gallagher learns to do deeper research as he gets more experience in the Senate. He also mentioned he had a brother who served in Vietnam and a neighbour who served in World War II, and they don't complain about the superannuation. Well, I suspect the brother that served in Vietnam may not have even done 20 years and may not have even understood anything about the DFRDB scheme. As for the neighbour, he should qualify for service pension, or brackets war service pension, and that does fairly index. He made a point and said, you can get out after 20 years service and you can go on to another career and you can earn your superannuation there. And I agree wholeheartedly, provided that first half of your working life, and in fact it's probably more than the first half, if not everyone works for 40 years, but let's call it first half. If the first half of your working life superannuation retains its value as intended, then your logic is right, Senator Gallagher. They can go out there and earn some more if they're able of body and mind. They can go and earn some more money in another career and put the two together, and you've got a comfortable superannuation to live on and not have to draw on welfare from this country. But you can't do that if your first half of your working life's savings are eroded away deliberately And I'll say deliberately because it can't be accidental. They've been told time and time again, and now one party is saying, yes, we should have done it when we were in power last. It's got to be addressed that the savings that you make in that first half of your working career have to be protected by fair indexation that maintains purchasing power. Senator Bishop was the last speaker to speak for the government, and it was interesting because he actually didn't speak to the MPI, the topic of the MPI at all, but he opened up by saying that the youth of Australia that joins the military make an irrational act by doing so. And then he went on to acknowledge that because of that irrationality, it puts the onus on the government to look after them and to look after their spouse and their dependents if they're injured or killed. So in a way, he brought a dimension in that I thought was very important to the Senate, and that is that he addressed the unique nature of military service and why it is that way back there in '72, the Jess report recommended and the Whitlam government endorsed, and then it was endorsed by the following on Liberal government, that it is important that we maintain the purchasing power of the military superannuation pensions. But this thought that it's an irrational act surprised me for someone who spent a long time of his working life in the military. And I was reminded of a statement. I'd like to read it to you. It came from an English economist and a philosopher, John Stuart Mills. And he said, "War is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of things. The decayed and degraded state of moral and patriotic feeling which thinks that nothing is worth war is much worse. The person who has nothing for which he is willing to fight, nothing which is more important than his own personal safety, is a miserable creature and has no chance of being free unless made and kept so by the exertions of better men than himself." No, Senator, I don't call it an irrational act. I say, thank God they do it, because Australia is going to need them in years to come.